So-called honor killings are an archaic form of vigilante justice. These killings often target women who have defied their husband or father's moral code or religious beliefs. They only used to occur in certain Middle Eastern nations. But today, honor killings happen in the United States, even in big cities like Houston, Texas.
Oh my God, why did God do this to me?
While the man behind the killings in this case wants you to think that he was driven by honor, what he's really driven by is power and control. I've never worked on an honor killing case before, but when friends of mine were appointed special prosecutors in this case, I knew a lot of pressure was on them to prove to a jury that it was really not about religion at all.
I'm a very, very dangerous man. God knows it's from the World War II.
If his rules are not followed, you will die. It's as simple as that.
This isn't an attack on the Muslim religion. This is one man and one family's extremist views.
Around midnight, my phone rings. It's the desk officer informing me we got a case. It's in the Sugar Hill Galleria area of Houston. When I pull into the driveway, I'm met by the patrol officer that was the primary unit on the call. He found this car running with the tires spinning on the pavement, and at that time he saw the victim laying across the front seat, slumped over the console. It's a woman who's deceased. She was shot in the head. We called the medical examiner's office. They took possession of the victim. We were able to then collect evidence in and out inside the car. There was part of a bullet fragment recovered on the ground. There's a cell phone in the car, and a purse in the front passenger seat. In her purse, we found her wallet with her driver's license. It revealed her name was Gallery Bagherzadeh. She was approximately 30 years of age, and she lived in the community right there in the townhomes. Being responsible for the witness interviews of this investigation, I knocked on several doors, and a man who lived the adjacent building over, he could see out of his bedroom window. He saw a silver or a light blue Camry or a Honda Accord fleeing from the scene.
But the witness doesn't get the license plate. He also had no idea what the driver looked like.
We go back and we're still going over the scene, and then we meet with Robin Bandar. We were told that he was on the phone with Gallery at the time of her murder. How he's talking to her as she was driving home, and then he heard something. The line was still open, but there's nothing there. He's calling her name, Gallery doesn't respond, and he heard like a thud, and he was concerned that she may have been involved in a car accident. He drives to the townhome community where Gallery and her parents live, and he sees the police cars. Robin appeared to be upset, concerned, didn't know what happened. We explained to him that she's been shot. Gallery was murdered. After we concluded our scene investigation and the vehicle was removed, we walked to Gallery's parents' house to make a death notification. It was very emotional. Her mom just broke down, tears running down her face. Heartbreaking, for somebody to have to go through that.
When Robin Bandar shows up at the crime scene, he had been on the phone with her, so they have to take a good hard look at him to see if they have a motive, if they're upset, if he plays any part in all this.
Robin, he tells us that several years ago, he and Gallery had dated shortly, and now they were just good friends. He says she was driving home, probably a 45 minute drive, and they were on the phone the entire time. Gallery told him that she had been at Corey's, her boyfriend's house, and so we needed to talk to Corey because he was one of the last persons that saw Gallery alive. next day, Corey came to the homicide division. We learned that Guillory met Corey while she was at school. The night this murder occurred, Corey said he didn't know Guillory was coming over that evening, that there was a knock at the door. When he answered the door, Guillory said, "I just wanted to surprise you." So he said they just hung out for a couple hours, and then she drove home. We polygraphed Corey Beavers. We think he's telling us the truth.
The initial impression by the police department is that these people are believable and that they're not involved in the murder of Guillory. But it's not a waste of time, because the more people you can talk to get a feel for what's going on in the victim's life, the better your investigation is going to proceed.
I remember it was early in the morning and I got a call. I was in shock. Who would have done something like this to her? You know, you can't find anyone more likable than her. Guillory was always the life of every party. Guillory was born in Paris and grew up in Tehran, Iran. She was a force. Passionate, lively, outspoken. Back in the day, there was a movement. This was right after an election in Iran, which was taken away, or at least that's how people felt. It was a one-party regime which told everybody what to do and how to live their lives. So there were mass protests in Iran, and we just showed our support. In Houston, we worked together, planning events, hosting events, talked to the media. Our goal was to be the sound of the Iranian people, so people in the United States would be aware of what is happening. He was the one who would be there first and leave the last. Guillory was the forefront of every event. I think every person that was there knew her because she was very involved. People from her church, her school. It was just such an emotional moment.
After 5 more months of investigation, HPD is still searching for Guillory's killer. And then on November the 12th, 2012, a shocking 911 call is made.
911. Hello?
Oh, ma'am, my husband's been shot.
Did he shoot himself or did somebody else shoot him?
No, ma'am, somebody shot him. He's terrifying my life. Why did God do this to me?
God wasn't the one that did it.
The caller is a frantic young woman named Nesreen Ursan. The victim is 28-year-old Cody Beavers, who's her husband. And to their surprise, law enforcement discovers he also happens to be the twin brother of Guillory's boyfriend, Corey.
I met with Nesreen, and I'll never forget what she said to me. She knew this was going to happen.
He always threatened that he'd pull a bullet between my eyes and between my boyfriend's eyes.
When we popped the vent off, there was these GPS devices.
One of them showed the date of Cody Beavers' murder.
There's blood all over the place.
I get a call about a body that's been found inside an apartment. When I arrived at Legacy Park Apartments, the crime scene unit was there. They had the area taped off, and I was briefed by patrol of what they had so far. I'm told that there's a female, Nesreen Ursan, that came home from work and found her husband shot to death inside her apartment. His name was Cody Beavers. I did not see forced entry, and I go in. The victim was laying partially face down inside the living area. There looked like there had been a fight. Body looked like it had several strikes, indicating multiple shots. There was an AK-47 rifle that was leaning against the wall where the victim was found. One of his arms was actually reaching toward that weapon. I didn't really see anything that appeared to be missing. There's expensive items there, so it rules out robbery. It appeared to be a small caliber gun from multiple shots on the victim's body, but we didn't find any shell casings. Anytime a victim is found by his spouse, you're always going to start with, the spouse. And I met with Nazreen in my vehicle, and I'll never forget what she said to me. She told me, "Sergeant Duce, I have a lot to tell you if you're willing to listen to me." And I said, "We're going to go to our office," and that's where we went. And then we sat and talked. Nazreen told me that her and her husband, Cody, had met at school, and they had been married a short time before Cody was killed. She told me that they were afraid that this was going to happen, and that she was quite sure that her father, Ali Ersan, murdered Cody Beavers.
My dad always threatened that if he ever found out that I had a boyfriend, he'd pull a bullet between my eyes and between my boyfriend's eyes.
Nazreen explained to me that her father was a very devout Muslim from Jordan. Ersan had 12 kids from 2 people. He was very controlling, wanted to control her and any of her siblings' movement, wouldn't let her date, wouldn't let her go out with other people, and she and her siblings, as well as his second wife, Shamu, had been beaten, been abused regularly by Ali Ersan. But Ali let Nazreen go to school at MD Anderson, and she got Americanized. She met Galleray, and she also met Corey Beavers, who introduced her to Cody Beavers. And they fell in love.
Let him think.
All right. I know it's hard. Hillary, you have to wait.
At that time, Nazreen stopped being concerned about her father. She was seeking to live her life. She was seeking to not be held captive in the ways that Ali Ersan was trying to force her to live against her will. Ali Ersan found out about Nazreen seeing Cody Beavers, and he showed up at her school. He caught her, and then she was taken home and then not allowed to leave. He kept her hostage.
He was beating me almost every single day.
Your dad?
Yes.
But Ersan would make trips out of the country. He left and went to Jordan. While he did, Nazreen ended up climbing out of a bathroom window. She ran away to live with Cody Beavers. Ali Ersan returned from Jordan, and now he's looking for her. Cody and Nazreen secretly got married and found an apartment at Legacy Park Apartments in Houston. But Nazreen knew that her father was stalking them.
He knows where I work, but he also knew where I lived.
They described seeing Ali Ersan's silver van at Legacy Park Apartments, and that it would slow down and be outside watching. And so they would take precautions to park away from their apartment. They bought an AK-47 rifle because they were afraid of her father. Her and her husband, Cody, had a daily routine. She would get up and leave the house by 6 a.m.
He walks me to my car, and then I drag him close so that he can go up the stairs, and he's supposed to call me and tell me he's safe inside. But today he didn't call me. And I kept calling him and kept calling him.
How many times do you think you tried to call?
About 20, 25 times. I got home at about 4 or something. And I went in, and I was like, Cody, and I looked around, and he was in the corner on the ground, and there was blood everywhere.
And then Nazreen explained to me that she believed her father was also responsible for Galleray's murder.
Nazreen tells the investigators that after she and Cody got married, her dad contacted Galleray to try and find out where she was, but she would not give them any information.
She told him that he needed to leave Nazreen alone because she was doing the right thing. And this made him furious. And he said, I will get you. 3 nights later is when she was murdered. It is a unique thing for a person to be telling you that She knows that her father is responsible for not only the death of her husband, but also her best friend, because they dishonored him in his mind. I learned that Detective Richard Bolton was the lead investigator in Galleray's murder.
Sergeant Doucet tells me, I got a guy that's been murdered. His name is Cody Beavers. His twin brother is Corey Beavers. So then, click. We know Corey Beavers. That's when we all come together, the FBI, the Houston Police Department, the Harris County Sheriff's Department, and because the Ursons live in Montgomery County, the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department, 12 people working this whole case.
When the information came out in the press that Cody and Galleray's murders might be connected, the Sheriff's Department, the Police Department just felt that sense of urgency because everybody wants to figure out what is the connection. It's somebody that knows them, who wants them both dead, so who is it?
We reach out to Ollie Urson, and he agrees to meet with us.
People believe that because of the relationships you have with Nazreen and not approving of her dating this guy that she's married to now, that you would cause harm to Nazreen.
I never gave him that impression.
We asked him if he knew Cody Beavers, and he denied that he'd ever met him.
Have you ever threatened her or her husband?
I have not talked to them at all.
Okay.
He said, no, we don't know nothing about it. You know, we asked him where they were at the time. Well, we were probably at home. We don't know.
Regarding the woman that was killed, Galari, did you know her?
No.
You never heard of Galari?
No.
As a friend of your daughter?
I don't know who's their friends. I don't know who they talk to. I don't know anything about them.
Ollie Ursan tried to come across as the caring father. He's just concerned about his daughter, but I've interviewed a lot of people, and his interview was deceptive.
Did you have anything to do with the death of Gallery?
I don't even know the woman. If I saw her, I wouldn't know her.
When I say the deception was there, he was showing signs. He had to step out several times to go smoke. He would repeat our questions to us.
I have nothing to do with that girl. I don't know her. I never saw her.
But ultimately, we didn't have the evidence we need to file murder charges on him.
You know, I wish I can do anything to help you guys.
My next step is I wanted a search warrant. I wanted to learn about him. I wanted to get into Ollie Ursan's world. We talked to Nazreen again, and she went through everything about her father.
Tell me what your dad's name is again.
He has multiple names, but the one he goes by is Ollie Ursan.
They learned that Ali immigrated to the United States in 1979, and he married an American girl who was only 17 years old, getting her GED at the time, named Robin Dahl. Robin Dahl later gave birth to 4 daughters named Nasima, Nadia, Nazreen, and Nada. In 1994, Ursan traveled to Jordan to find a new wife, and he returned with a teenage girl named Shamu.
He told my mother that he's just marrying that girl because he wants her to be a maid because my mom is blind. And in Islam, it's legal for him to marry more than one woman at a time.
Soon after Ursan returned with his new wife, his other wife, Robin, left him. She left behind the 4 children she had had with Ali Ursan with him. And he continued on to start a second family with Shamu, and they had 8 more children. And they all lived together on a compound outside of Houston in Conroe, Texas.
What business is your dad in?
He claims to be disabled. He has a lot of money.
From?
Many different criminal activities that he does. Fraudulent claims.
Nazreen told us this unbelievable story of how her father was this serial fraudster who had defrauded airlines, doing fraudulent lost baggage claims, public assistance agencies, food stamps, Social Security, identity theft. It just went on and on and on.
Ollie Ursan and his wife, Shamu, they played the system, is what Nazreen described.
So we executed the search warrant for Ollie's property.
We wanted to get to where we could file charges on Ollie Ursan and his wife, Shamu, for fraud, and get them in custody, get them separated, to where we could talk with them and possibly even work them against each other.
We recover almost 200 credit cards, somewhere in Ali's name, and the rest of them in other family members' names.
We were able to get enough information on the fraud case to where we could file charges. Once we're able to get Ersan in custody for the financial crimes, now we're at a race against time because he's only going to be in custody for a certain amount of time on a financial crime, and we're still trying to find the evidence we need to file capital murder charges on him.
That's too good.
We tried to interview Ali Ersan, but he would start, grabbing his chest.
Sir, what kind of problems are you having?
He's faking a heart attack to keep from being interviewed, and that happened several times.
After Ali Ersan refuses to answer any more questions, investigators decide to listen through all of his jail calls.
One of the calls that we recovered is him speaking with his son, Nassim.
You listen to me, baby. I'm a very, very bad man. I don't know how many lives have to be lost. I'm a very, very dangerous man. You God knows it's from the World War II.
The investigators begin to wonder if Ali Ersan's son, Nassim, is possibly involved in the murders.
Listen to me. We need you. You are the man of the house.
There were a few people that knew, and now they can't speak.
We thought maybe this is Nassim Ersan getting as close as you possibly can to confessing to murdering people without saying their names or saying I pulled the trigger.
We didn't have enough evidence to file capital murder charges on them, but in the evidence from the search warrant, there's an envelope that had been found in the glove box of Ali Ersan's van, and written in handwriting is the license plate of Gallaray's vehicle.
This leads the investigators to do a search for any traffic stops in the area on the night of Gallaray's murder.
Shut your door for me.
And they find a traffic stop where Ali Ersan is speeding in the area on the very night of Gallaray's murder.
That wife in the car? Yes. Okay. Here's your backseat passenger. My son.
Well, lo and behold, from the time our 911 call for Gallaray's murder to that stop was like 40-something minutes.
The time of Gallaray's murder compared to the time on that traffic stop, that would have added up to the amount of time it would have taken them to get to that point.
And they were in the same kind of car that a witness described seeing speeding away from the murder.
At that time, we had surveillance on the Ersan family, on their movement, learned about their vehicles, learned everything that we could about them.
With FBI's resources, we have some aerial surveillance of Ali's sons hiding something that appears to be a secret compartment on top of the roof. There was a vent on Ali's house. It's like the eave of your house. Based off this surveillance, got another search warrant, went back to Ali's house, and we're up on top of the roof looking for this hidden compartment. But you could tell that the vent had been tampered with. When we popped the vent off, there was these GPS devices that had been placed up inside that eave of the house. The ones that you used to sit on your dashboard when you drive around.
Those GPS units were submitted to the FBI forensic laboratory where they were processed. One of them showed the date of Cody Beaver's murder. The location that it went to was Legacy Park Apartments.
The Legacy Park Apartment is where Cody and Nazreem were living when he was murdered. Now, Ali Ersan can be directly linked to the capital murders of both Gallaray and Cody. So, friends of mine were appointed special prosecutors of the case.
Ali Ersan was charged with capital murder of Gallaray Bagherzadeh and Cody Beavers, and his son Nassim and Shamu, Ali Ersan's second wife, who were charged with the murder of Gallaray Bagherzadeh. As we were getting closer to trial, we were missing a first account, some eyewitness that could say, I saw Ali Ersan with a gun. Shamu, we felt, had all that evidence. Shamu had time away from Ali Ersan, that she'd been sitting in jail for quite a long period of time. Some part of his control over her had been broken, and she knew she had to tell the story. So we approached her attorney and asked if she wanted to cooperate. They said yes. And at that point, Shmoo was forthcoming.
Defense was Alan Tanner and Rudy Duarte. Very talented and very thorough, definitely formidable opponents.
We felt the defense would definitely play on the cultural religious tenet, and the fact the case was very circumstantial.
Pretty sure the fallback defense is picking apart the prosecutor's case piece by piece, witness by witness, and arguing reasonable doubt.
I want the jury to understand that Ali Ersan was responsible, because we all believe Ali Ersan's a dangerous guy. We thought that if he were to get out, he would probably retaliate against every person involved.
Four years after Ali Ersan is arrested, he goes on trial for the capital murders of Galleray and Cody. The Harris County Courthouse was still closed from damage from Hurricane Harvey, so they tried the case at the federal courthouse. Because the federal courtroom was so small, they only allowed the cameras in for the first day.
This isn't an attack on the Muslim religion. This is one man and one family's extremist views that were taken to the extreme.
In the past, I handled two cases involving religion. Defendants named Bhagashwarna and Sharma, and also Pastor James Eugene Tucker. In those cases, you try to walk the line of not belittling or demeaning anybody's religion while making the point that what this is really about is one man's control or power.
He wanted to kill all of those involved in bringing shame and dishonor, in his mind, to his family. We wanted the jury to understand the evidence was pretty overwhelming, like the GPS devices that Ali and Shmoo had on their car really laid out an unbelievable number of trips to these locations that the only explanation for them being there is to stalk and kill these people.
She's going to tell you she was kidnapped. She's going to tell you she was handcuffed and beaten by her mother, Shmoo. She's going to tell you all sorts of things, and I don't believe them. And it's up to you to decide if you believe her.
There is a lot of testimonial evidence. And so the defense strategy was to discredit those folks and to point the finger in other directions if they could.
Listen to what they have to say and weigh it out and see if you think they are telling the truth or if they are lying.
One of the most powerful and important witnesses in this case is Nazreen. Nazreen's testimony is very important to explaining the mentality of her father and growing up with that man.
You can see the fear in her as she's walking in the courtroom to take the stand.
She said that Ali definitely ruled with an iron fist when someone disobeyed or did something he didn't approve of. The beatings were severe. And she said that where the Ersan family lived, it was a compound where he controlled who came in, who left, and what happened while they were there.
It's the defense lawyer's turn to cross-examine Nazreen. Their goal is to try and poke holes in her story, to poke holes in her credibility, while making her father seem a little more sympathetic.
Alan Tanner is cross-examining Nazreen. He's doing a great job of bringing out, hey, he wasn't all bad. He did some good things. He, for instance, gave y'all pets. You remember this? And she agrees, yes, he gave us a pet. And you remember at one point he bought you a monkey, a pet monkey. Yes, I remember that. And then he killed it. I thought, well, that didn't go the way they planned.
There's only one person who can give an inside account of both of the murders of Galleray and Cody. Ali Ersan's second wife, Shmoo.
Shmoo was with him each time and knew what was happening, the planning, the plotting, the thought process, the facts of the brutal murders. She did not want to testify in front of him. She was still scared of him, and she was scared actually of her own sons. I had asked her to please look at me and not look at him to try and alleviate some of the fear. She laid out when Ali decided it was the night that Galleray was going to die. They saw Galleray leave the Beaver's address, and They followed her.
When she went back there to turn around, they blocked her in. The same's the one that went up there and shot her.
Shmoo laid out the morning of Cody's death. She said they knew at that time from making various runs that Cody didn't lock the apartment when he walked Nasreen down to her car. And so she detailed they were waiting for them to leave the apartment, going upstairs and laying in wait for Cody to come back. Just her matter-of-fact demeanor and laying it all out, it was shocking. The defense's position was she was just lying and she was trying to get revenge. She got a deal, and so she was just going to say or do whatever to benefit herself. The problem with the defense's line of attack was it wasn't just Shmoo's word that we had. We have the GPS. So there was objective evidence to back up what she was saying.
The state rested their case, and then the defense called Ali Ersan to the stand. You got to believe that his lawyers advised him not to do that, but they probably knew no one's ever been able to tell Ali Ersan what to do.
He presents himself as an adoring father that wanted his children to make good decisions that would go along with the Muslim faith, and that he was not happy about what Nasreen had done, but he certainly would never have harmed her.
He's trying to say that Nasreen, she's the reason he's here. She is making a lot of this up, and that she's the dangerous one.
We're fearful that the jury's going to think Ali Ersan is an affable older gentleman, patriarch of his family, loves his children. That is what he wants to portray to the jury. But I know Ali Ersan is about power and control. Most of the times when you're cross-examining a witness, you're asking questions such as their yes or no. You're not really allowing them to expand on their answers. I knew Ali was never going to do that, but I knew how important it was to maintain my composure and just continually ask my questions until I got an answer. Not what he wanted to tell the jury, but an answer to my question. It was justice that a woman got to cross-examine Ali Ersan. Ali does not think much of women. He certainly does not think that they should be allowed to question him. He did let his irritation for the way I was conducting my cross-examination be known to the jury.
He is staring daggers at Marie Prim, and he's got 2 pencils in his hand.
He looked at me and angrily busted the pencils, and it scared the jury for my safety. I thought, who better to convince the jury of what kind of person you are than yourself? And you just did it. In my closing statement, in the murder of Galilea Bagherzadeh and Cody Beavers, I want the jury to know there is not a tenet of the Islam faith that told Ali Ersan to commit these acts of cruelty. The decision should not be a conviction of the Islam faith. It's a judgment on Ali Ersan.
The prosecutors had to walk a fine line since religion is so involved with all this. But really, when it comes down to it, this was never about religion or God. It was about the power and control and arrogance of one man. And they did a beautiful job explaining that to the jury.
I don't think the jury was out an hour, and they found him guilty.
It was a long time coming, a testament to all of the hard work put in by the prosecutors and all the investigators that worked on this case.
I think it brought more relief to the community. They just wanted justice.
Mr. Ersan, we believed, was the most culpable of the crimes, therefore deserved the most punishment.
In the punishment phase of the trial, the jury has to consider 2 factors. The first is Ali Ersan going to be a future threat to society? The second consideration is, are there any mitigating factors in this man's entire life that because of that, life is more deserving than the death penalty?
We brought Ali's first wife, Robin, who was Nesreen's mother, to testify.
The state is allowed to bring in any witness from any point in Ali Ersan's life to further describe what kind of a man he is.
Robin testified about how they had met.
I was 17, and then the people I was staying with kicked me out of their house. I just first met him, and he raped me. I was kind of ashamed. And then after that, he says, "Now I have to marry you."
He essentially rapes her and turns it into a forced relationship. She had 4 children with him.
He found that my mom was looking for me, and he took me to a different county, and he didn't let me know that she was looking for me. And he threatened me with a knife.
Robin testified that he had abused her, threatened her with weapons, tried to kill her.
He scared me a lot. I tried to get away many times.
Next, in the punishment phase, we called Nesreen back on the stand. Nesreen says Cody Beavers is not the first son-in-law Ali Ersan killed. He killed his first son-in-law back in 1999.
Nesreen says she had an older sister named Nasima, and Nasima was living at home and had met a friend of Ali's, and she kind of liked him. He had approached Ali and asked for her hand in marriage, and Ersan said no. Ersan was a Sunni Muslim, and this friend was a Shiite Muslim, and there's no way he was going to let him marry his daughter. Ali Ersan went to Jordan. They eloped to Dallas. They got married. So when Ersan returned home, he called him and he says, "Come over, let's talk about it." Nesreen was 14 at the time. She was in the house. He made all the family get in the back room. So Nesreen could hear what was going on, but she couldn't see. And she said she heard a loud shot from a shotgun, and then she heard 2 smaller shots, like from a smaller caliber weapon. Ali Ersan called Montgomery County Sheriff's Office and said, "He pulled a gun on me. I had to defend myself."
The police at the time didn't do much investigation into it. There was a gun there that fit the story that Ali had given them.
Ali Ersan knows what he's doing when he's talking to law enforcement.
The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office took Ali Ersan at his word, self-defense. It was never presented to a grand jury, and Ali got cleared in that.
For the trial, we put together the crime scene evidence from that case that wasn't looked at back in 1999. The way it's described to the police, the victim's angry and Ali just shoots him and he falls where he is. But crime scene photos demonstrate that the victim had been in a different position for a long period of time. You could see the blood going down and then turning. The scene had been adjusted. This was important in terms of, again, played into the theme of you're going against my wishes, you're dishonoring me, you're dishonoring the family, you're dishonoring the religion. And Ali Ersan's not going to let that slide.
In the punishment phase of the trial, the defense has a hard battle, but they try to humanize Ali Ersan as much as they can.
What the defense has to do is try to give the jury something that they can feel is mitigating on behalf of Mr. Ersan. They want the jury to have a reason not to sentence him to death.
And they do that by flying in some relatives of his from Jordan and also by putting Ali Ersan's grown sons on the witness stand.
A couple of his sons testified about what a great guy he was, but I can see that the jury understands that's not the way that the evidence played out. Clearly, he was abusive.
What stood out in my mind was how brainwashed these boys were. That almost made me sad.
Ersan's response was calm as the judge read the sentence, death by execution. In the words of Cody Beavers' mother, her son's murder and that of Galerie Begerzadeh were the acts of an evil coward, and the verdict a victory.
That's a strange feeling to get a verdict where they sentence a person to death. It's a pretty powerful and emotional thing for everybody. Ali's sentence was important in terms of the other defendants having the opportunity to see what was potentially coming. It led to Nassim pleading guilty. He got 40 years, and Shmoo got a deal for her testimony.
Prior to the trial, Ali Ersan's wife, Shmoo, pled to a lesser offense of felony kidnapping for that time when they held Nazreen captive at the house. She's expected to be eligible for parole in 2026. To have to walk into the courtroom and testify against that monster while he's glaring at her took some courage. And I think that everybody appreciates that she's a victim in this case also.
I was left with a lot of admiration for Nasreen Ersan and for Robin Dahl, his first wife. Those are probably the strongest women that I've ever met in my entire life. To be able to stand up to a man that you know has no problem killing somebody. They refuse to be ruled by his cruelty. And to me, that's amazing.
Cody Beavers and Gallery Bagherzadeh never would have imagined that this could happen to them. Human nature says, well, I mean, it doesn't matter who you are friends with or who you fall in love with. It's just, that's the way it is. But there are some people that cuts against their beliefs enough that it's worth killing somebody.
These prosecutors did a phenomenal job. They had a lot to deal with politically and religiously, and they handled all that. If anybody deserved the death penalty, Ali Ersan did.
Cody Beaver's mother and the family got to stand there and watch him being walked out on his way to death row. And she hugged my neck and she thanked me. And it was like fulfillment, you know, it's like a lot of work, but we got there. It was sad to see a young couple, how happy they were, how happy she was, and how her life was changed. They took her husband, her love.
This one? How to survive the end of the world.
There are always bad people doing bad things. And then there are people like Hillary. Hillary could have changed the world. She could definitely have an impact. She was full of life. I think Hillary was very brave. She always did what she thought was the right thing to do.
On September the 22nd, 2003, multimillionaire Robert Durst was on trial in Galveston, Texas for the murder of Morris Black. That trial was the beginning of one of the biggest legal stories in America.
All eyes were on this case.
This was an international story because the defendant owned more than anybody probably owned in all of New York City.
This case was not going to be a whodunit. It was going to be a whydunit.
This is what Mr. Durst did to Morris Black.
How in the hell do we get this jury to look at what happened versus all the he did afterwards that makes him look like a very dangerous, calculated killer?
This was not a case that I was involved in. The lawyers that were involved are all friends of mine. But even as much as I thought I knew, I had no idea what was really going on in Galveston County.
None of it makes sense. Absolutely none of it.
It would be nice to believe that when you have the evidence, when it's credible and compelling, you're going to get the right verdict. But when you have a defendant with unlimited resources and money, unfortunately, that's not the way it always happens. It's important to find out truly what happened behind the scenes in Galveston County, truly what happened with that jury, with that verdict, with those lawyers. That's a story nobody has ever heard before.
They broadcast it as a torso floating in the bay. And the body would have been down in here. And I actually pointed out to the bay and I said, look at those dark spots just under the surface of the water. Out beyond the pier, because you can see the dark shadows of the bags out there. And then we fished in 3 bags that were floating under the water. That was 2 arms and a leg. And then the missing leg was found farther west of the crime scene, washed up on the beach. There was no head. Kind of seared into your memory, if you will. It's hard to forget.
I finished all the chores for the day. I sit down, turn on the TV to watch Sunday Night Football, and within 2 or 3 seconds, the phone rings. I answer the phone, and dispatch says, "This is Galveston Dispatch. We have a torso floating in the bay." And I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't hear you right. What did you say?" I got in the car, and I respond to the scene.
I think one of the things people don't know is sometimes prosecutors are on call, kind of like a doctor's on call. In special crimes at Harris County, we were on call 24 hours a day with a beeper or with the cell phone.
You don't want to make any assumptions at that point. You let the evidence tell you where to go next. We have the torso, 2 legs, 2 arms, and 3 empty bags. I see the trash in the bags. There was a cover for a bow saw. One thing that really stood out that I remember, there was a newspaper flyer that said resident and had an address on Avenue K. The immediate thought was that that address may very well have something to do with this crime.
Using fingerprints, the medical examiner is able to confirm the identity of that headless body as being 71-year-old Morris Black. Why would anybody want Morris Black dead, and why would anybody need to mutilate his body in such a horrible way? While Morris Black's family is notified about his death, the Galveston Police Department arrives at that address on Avenue K.
The trash was out at the curb, and inside the trash can there was a .22 pistol and an empty shell casing. We're very much thinking we had a murder weapon at that point.
The police department also recovered an eyeglass prescription in the trash, and the name of the prescription belonged to Robert Durst. At this time, nobody knew who Robert Durst was.
We also found an eviction notice for Morris Black for apartment number 1. Inside Morris Black's apartment, there was blood in the drain, the sink, the shower, certainly evidence that would indicate that blood was being washed down the drain. And they found evidence of blood in the hallway going from Morris Black's apartment to the apartment across the hall. The landlord told us that Dorothy Siegler was the person who rented the apartment across the hall from Morris Black.
Dorothy Siegler is not at the apartment, so the police department gets a search warrant for that second apartment, and when they go inside, they find blood spatter on the walls.
There were drop cloths and cuts of linoleum consistent with dismemberment of the body. Morris Black was kind of a loner. He had a good heart, but he could be difficult.
Morris Black would wear like a little knit cap all the time, and he walked around like a sailor man, and he was a merchant marine. The way he lived was off the grid. He kept to himself.
Usually you can get a better feel for your victim, but Morris Black just kind of stayed this shadowy character that not a lot was ever known about.
The autopsy showed that there was an injury to the head while he was alive because there was blood in the lungs. Only way you can get that is flowing blood coming down the esophagus, down into the lungs, and the person is breathing at the time. We know he wasn't shot in the torso, the arms, or the legs. We know there was a gunshot because of the high velocity spatter. Likely conclusion, Morris Black was shot in the head. So this person who rented the apartment under the name Dorothy Siegler was somebody we wanted to talk to. And through the internet, we were able to locate Dorothy Siegler and actually called her up and talked to her. She had no connection to Galveston. She had no connection to Morris Black. We asked her about Robert Durst. She went to high school with Robert Durst.
We do not believe in coincidences in the criminal justice system. And the fact that Robert Durst went to high school with Dorothy Siegler, I call it circumstantial evidence.
During the investigation, we came across information that Robert Durst may have dressed as a woman from time to time.
Librarians said that they did see Robert Durst and Morris Black together at the library, and that Robert Durst would come in dressed in drag.
And so we figured that Robert Durst is Dorothy Siegler. Officers pulled over the vehicle, which was driven by Robert Durst. And inside the car, they found a bow saw and traces of blood in the back portion of the SUV. Officer Cody and I were upstairs of Galveston Police Department where Robert Durst was, and he asked what his bond was. And Cody told him it was $250,000, and then asked him, "Do you have that kind of money?" And his response was, "Not on me." He's booked, and then he made bond, I believe, the next day. At that time, I got a call from a New York Times reporter asking me to look at an old photo and see if it's the same Robert Durst. From there, all hell broke loose.
We find out Robert Durst was actually a real estate heir from New York City. His family owns Times Square. So what in the world is Robert Durst doing dressed as a woman in Galveston, Texas in some crappy apartment?
Galveston is a port city, so we have people from all over the world coming through our ports.
And it seems to be the perfect place to get away, disappear, and hide if you're looking to do that.
One of the reporters told me that he was a suspect in the disappearance of his wife from a long time ago, and that case had never been solved.
He's also a suspect in LA in his best friend Susan Berman's murder only a year earlier. Maybe he was hiding in Galveston because these charges were heating up.
When the time comes for Durst to show up for the initial hearings in the Morris Black case, he is nowhere to be found.
He was on the lam, and turns out he's got resources to be on the lam forever if he wants.
You know, if he's that wealthy, just pay the cash to bond out like that. There's no telling where he is now. You know, he's gone.
Someone killed someone and cut their body up? That seems crazy.
Robert Durst hired the dream team of Texas.
Justice isn't black or white, it's green. And he had the green.
The police department has arrested Robert Durst for the murder of Morris Black. But with seemingly unlimited financial resources, Robert Durst skips town and now he's on the run.
Robert, please come home. The trust has the wherewithal to pay for your legal defense.
45 days goes on. They're searching for Robert Durst. He's finally found 1,500 miles away from Galveston, Texas, in Pennsylvania, where he's arrested, shoplifting a sandwich.
He rented a car, and he's using Morris Black's ID, and he's using Morris Black's name.
While all this is going on, you also have a prosecutor in Westchester County, New York, looking into a murder allegation against Robert Durst there, and another one in LA County, California, where they're looking at the possibility of Robert Durst also committing a murder there.
Because there was a lot of evidence. The Morris Black case looked...
When two young women, Colleen Reed and Melissa Northrup, go missing in eerily odd, similar circumstances, all signs point to a death row inmate who's on parole and on the run. Nobody can find that convicted killer, and a massive manhunt ensues. The way he killed people, the way he tortured them, the pleasure he took in it is on a whole different level.
Are you Melissa's killer? No.
And in the aftermath of his trial, the corruption involved with the parole system is exposed for all the world to see. I've prosecuted a lot of really horrible people, but Kenneth McDuff is in a world of his own.
The evidence shows that this defendant is every person's nightmare.
No comment.
Melissa Northrup is a petite mother of 2 children and pregnant. She's working these pre-dawn hours at a convenience store to make ends meet. Melissa Northrup's husband phones his wife just to check up on her. Becomes alarmed that she's not answering her phone. So he drives down there and goes in. There's no sign of his wife.
Melissa's husband, Aaron Northrup, when he found out that she was missing, immediately called the Waco Police Department.
911. Yeah, this is Aaron Northrup at the Quick Pack at 4200 LaSalle. I need a sheriff's DPS officer over here immediately. What's wrong? My wife is missing. She's not nowhere to be found around her store. This place is totally vacant. Customers were watching the store.
What is her name?
Melissa Ann Northrup.
We have a missing attendant at the Quick Pack. Her name is Melissa Ann Northrup, white female, 22 years of age. Her vehicle is also missing. There was some money missing from the store, and right now we're treating this as a robbery kidnapping. We have no suspects this time. Our husband, he has no idea where she's at neither. Of course, he's worried. Our whole family is worried. We just want to locate this young lady.
I talked to my wife 5 minutes before this happens. All of a sudden, she's just gone. And I don't know if you can imagine how that feels.
Investigators found a tan 2-door Thunderbird abandoned on the parking lot of a motel located just a few hundred feet from the convenience store where Melissa Northrup has disappeared. The police runs the registration and finds that it's registered to Kenneth Allen McDuff.
Kenneth McDuff is a death row inmate in Texas who was surprisingly paroled out off of a life sentence 2.5 years before Melissa Northrup went missing. He was convicted of a triple homicide of some teenagers back in 1966.
In 1966, Kenneth McDuff and his accomplice, Troy Dell Green, set out on a mission. They went cruising for women. And they found 3 vulnerable teenagers, Edna Sullivan, Robert Brand, and his cousin, Mark Dunham, parked at a local high school on the baseball field, playing music, and they're just laughing and having fun. Little do they know, McDuff and Roy Dell Green are crawling toward the car. Roy Dell Green has a broken handle of a broomstick with him. And McDuff's got a revolver. He jumps up to the car window with his gun drawn, and then the nightmare starts. McDuff forced the 2 boys into the trunk of his car. He then took Edna Sullivan in Robert Brand's car and drove it down these country roads with Troy Dell Green following in McDuff's car. Finally, they came to a desolate place. He opens the trunk, and there's Robert Brand and his cousin, and he tells his accomplice, Roy Dell Green, they've seen us. I gotta kill them. And he shoots them. Then drags Edna Sullivan to the back of the car and assaults her with the broken handle of a broomstick. He straddled Edna Sullivan and placed the broomstick across her throat, and he crushed her larynx.
McDuff and Roy Dell Green drove back to the Rosebud area where they lived. And then several days later, Roy Dell Green felt terribly guilty about what happened and spoke to the sheriff there and confessed what they had done. It was an absolutely terrible crime, absolutely brutal in every way. And so the sheriff and other deputies began looking for McDuff. They were able to find him. He tried to get away. There was some shooting, and then he was captured. The trial drew a lot of publicity.
The first time I heard the name Kenneth McDuff was in 1966. My father was U.S. Marshal at the time. He was talking to the sheriff of Falls County, and he was a tough guy, but he was visibly shaken up, and he was telling my dad about McDuff, and it made me sick. He was known as the broomstick killer because that's what he used to kill Edna Sullivan with after he tortured her with it.
Rodell Green pleaded guilty to one of the murders and some of the circumstances, so he got a 5-year sentence and a 25-year sentence. And he turned state's evidence to testify against Kenneth McDuff.
The jury found Kenneth McDuff guilty, and he was assessed the death penalty.
6 years after Kenneth McDuff had killed the 3 high school teenagers, Furman v. Georgia came down from the United States Supreme Court. In that landmark case, the Supreme Court said that the death penalty was unconstitutional because it was applied arbitrarily all across the country. That meant that every death row inmate in the country, including Kenneth McDuff, had their death sentence commuted to life.
Texas prisons had become very crowded. So, although he had originally gotten a death penalty, Kenneth McDuff was released from prison on parole.
When Kenneth McDuff had his sentence commuted to life, you want to believe, okay, we're still safe, because he would never be released to free society again, but he was. Everybody in the criminal justice system was wondering, how can this happen?
The Waco area, Central Texas area, certainly had its share of crime, but abductions, missing persons, that would have been pretty unusual. And then the circumstances of it were odd. So you suspect the worst.
The investigators didn't have a lot to go on. And when they came up with this license plate that came back to McDuff, that was something to work on, but that wasn't enough to find and to arrest Kenneth McDuff. You still have to have evidence, and you still have to investigate the case.
We knew we had to do something to try to find Melissa. If she was kidnapped by McDuff, the urgency was paramount.
All of a sudden, we learn about a case that sounds a whole lot like Melissa's.
Then police told me, we believe she's been abducted. Yeah, this is a nightmare.
We felt like McDuff probably got her.
And by the way, he's a killer.
I think that everyone wanted to believe that Melissa Northrup was out there still alive. Everybody was focused on trying to find her and track down her kidnapper.
Melissa's car was discovered by a fisherman near the gravel pit outside of Dallas. He contacted the local authorities. No fingerprints were found in Melissa's car, but the seat was pushed all the way back. Melissa was like 4'10", 4'11". Kenneth McDuff was a big guy. He was 6'3", 6'4", weighed probably 270 pounds or so. It indicated that a very large person, someone of McDuff's size, had been driving that car. An extensive search was conducted in that area, but she was not found.
One day after the car had been located, I received a missing persons report for Kenneth Allen McDuff, and this was reported by his mother, Addie McDuff. She said she'd not heard from him in days. She was concerned about him. Kenneth McDuff had a parole violation warrant at that time.
This is the oldest scam going. When a parolee has jumped parole and taken off, often a family member will say they're missing, just as a cover story.
with McDuff missing about the same time that Melissa Northrop was missing, and with McDuff's car within 100 feet or so of the convenience store, we thought that ought to give rise to some pretty quick action by the state to try to at least find the guy. Unfortunately, the DA says there's no probable cause. We're not getting a warrant to get McDuff, even though the woman's missing. Circumstantially, he's connected to it, and by the way, he's a killer.
This is just the way you follow the law, and that's what they were doing here. And they didn't have enough evidence to connect anybody to the disappearance of Melissa Northrop. So at that point, Bill Johnston came up with a novel approach to try and figure out where Kenneth McDuff was and get him in custody.
One of the deputies said, "We have a bail bond clerk whose boyfriend might have run around with McDuff." And I talked to the boyfriend and I asked him, "What did you do with him?" And he said, "Well, he bought 2 tabs of LSD and gave me one." That's federal drug distribution. I called the U.S. magistrate judge and said, "Your Honor, I'd like to send over a complaint and warrant alleging a violation of 21 United States Code Section 841A1, distribution of a controlled substance, namely LSD." The judge signed the warrant, and so a nationwide manhunt for Kenneth McDuff took place on the distribution of a single tab of LSD. It went through a huge effort by many agencies and many people.
The Central Texas Task Force, as we called it at the time, was the McLennan County Sheriff's Office, Waco Police, of course, U.S. Marshals. We had officers from ATF. It was an unbelievable effort on everybody's part to catch this guy as quickly as we could.
They did a search warrant at McDuff's parents' house, and during which the mother declared, "Don't frame little Junior." The father, he was in the garage of their house during the search, and I heard him say, "Oh, that boy's cost me a lot of money. You can kill him when you find him if you want to." I mean, it's a real loving family.
While the task force is looking for Melissa Northrop and Kenneth McDuff, they hear of the disappearance of someone from Austin, Texas that happened just a few months before. It sounds eerily similar to what happened to Melissa Northrop.
Colleen Reed and I were seriously dating. The 29th of December, 1991, she had errands to run, and she mentioned she had to go wash her car. And then probably about 9:30, I got the first call from the police department asking to speak to Colleen. And I said, "Well, she's not here. What's going on?" And they said, "Well, we found her car abandoned at the car wash, and we believe she's been abducted." I was surprised and obviously worried. Colleen was a gift from God. She was a blessing to me. She was 28 at the time, and we talked about getting married and, having children and having a life together. She was very beautiful inside and out. She was just always looking to help people, and she cared about her community. She just volunteered for everything, and I think that was her passion, to do right things. We loved each other, no doubt about it.
The Colleen Reed case. Witnesses observed 2 males forcing a female into a Thunderbird.
We knew McDuff drove a tan Thunderbird. It's possible that it could have been the same car. So now we felt like McDuff was the one that probably got her. And so we were trying so hard to find out if she was still alive and maybe rescue her, along with Melissa Northrop.
Back then, there wasn't quite the technology today we might have gained from surveillance cameras. And so the approach that we took was, let's find everybody that knows McDuff and talk to them.
I was brought in as the liaison investigator since McDuff had spent so much time on death row. My job was interviewing ex-cons and guys out on parole that he knew from the penitentiary. He wasn't a very popular guy in the penitentiary.
He was running with really bad outlaws, scumbags of all kinds.
Finally, we developed an acquaintance named Hank Worley.
Worley was a paroled ex-con.
It was told to us he was an associate of McDuff's, and he drove around with McDuff.
I started doing research on Worley, and I determined that he had a civil hearing. I walked over to the courthouse on the day of the hearing, and I caught Worley as he was walking out. I asked him if I could talk to him. Worley said he would. Took him to the Bell County Sheriff's Office Criminal Investigation Division. I started questioning Worley about the Reed and Northrop disappearance. Worley was extremely nervous, trying not to make eye contact. I wasn't sure what he knew, but I didn't want to put a whole lot of pressure on him, and I didn't want to lose him. So I told him I'll be back in touch. Hank Worley was living at Bloom Motel with his daughter. It's a rundown, low-rent hotel. I went to visit Hank several times. One evening, about 6 o'clock, I received a phone call from Hank Worley. He said, "I need to talk to you now." So I drive over, and he was waiting outside for me. He walks over to the passenger side door, and he says, "I was with McDuff when he took that girl in Austin." He said, "I got to ask you a favor. Can I go talk to my daughter one last time because I'm probably not coming back?" I said, "Yes." He said goodbye to his daughter. He came back, got in the car, and we went to the sheriff's office.
Tim Steglich got Worley to tell what was probably 90% of the truth. And it was the worst thing I'd ever heard. And it remains the worst thing I'd ever heard.
When the investigators interview Hank Worley, not only does he talk about his own involvement, he gives them even more details about exactly what Kenneth McDuff did to Colleen Reed.
Worley started by saying he and McDuff went to Austin to get bent, which is to get high. And while they were driving on 5th Street, they see a female at a car wash. And McDuff made some statement that we're going to take that girl.
He tells us that Colleen Reed is washing her sports car at this car wash, and then McDuff pulls into the bay next to her, gets out, grabs her by the throat, brings her to the car, throws her in the back seat. McDuff gets in the back seat with her. Worley drives off, and then the torture begins.
Colleen Reed's hands were bound with shoelaces while they were in transit. They drove around Austin and then drove north on Interstate 35.
Worley told us McDuff is in the back seat torturing Colleen Reed with a cigarette over and over.
Worley drove a vehicle for 2 hours with a woman screaming.
He's visibly shaken up when he is remembering how loud her screams are. And he told us, he said, loud that hurt my ears. He had his head down and he was shaking. And then he went down on his knees. We're just in disbelief. And she begged Worley for help. Worley says, I was afraid of McDuff myself. There were all kind of ways Worley could have jumped out of the car and waved people down and got him involved, and McDuff would have been caught. But he was a low-life coward.
Colleen was taken to a field about 200 to 300 yards from Kenneth McDuff's parents' residence in Bell County.
McDuff drug her out of the car and reared back and hit her so hard in the face that Worley described it like a tree limb breaking. And so then he drags her over and threw her in the trunk. Afterwards, he took Worley by his house. McDuff let Worley out of the car, and McDuff drives off into the night with Colleen Reed in the trunk.
The level of brutality was shocking. We're speechless.
I was so angry. I can't even tell you what I wanted to do to Worley at the time.
What happened to her was everything we feared, and even worse. It's coming true. It all came to fruition. It's like, yeah, this is a nightmare. Sorry.
Although he didn't have any knowledge of Melissa Northrup's disappearance, the statement from Hank Worley is pretty hard to listen to, and it had to have gotten those investigators super fired up to try and find Kenneth McDuff.
Worley led us to believe that McDuff would have murdered Colleen Reed and buried her somewhere in that area of Bell County. The next day, there was a helicopter with an infrared unit on it. They had the entire Austin Police Cadet Academy come up and walk the fields. An enormous effort was made to try to find a grave, and none was ever found.
With Hank Worley's confession that he and Kenneth McDuff were the ones who abducted Colleen Reed, and Melissa Northrop going missing just 2 months after that in similar circumstances, the investigators knew they were on the right track. Kenneth McDuff was no longer just a person of interest. He is the sole suspect in the disappearance of Melissa Northrop.
What we know about Kenneth Allen McDuff, he's a violent, dangerous human being. And like the captain says, he needs to be off the streets.
Central Texas were on edge. People were scared to death that this creature would catch them or their wives or their daughters.
Almost 2 months after Melissa Northrop goes missing, a resident of South Dallas makes a grisly discovery.
Melissa Northrop's body is found in a deserted gravel pit that's filled with water in Dallas County, about a 100-mile drive from Waco. Her remains are found by a fisherman about a quarter-mile away from where her car was found stuck in the mud.
We do have a positive identification on the body. It is that of Melissa Ann Northrop.
The one clue that this is the work of Kenneth McDuff is that her ankles and hands are bound with shoelaces.
McDuff had certain traits and certain patterns, and one of them was he liked to bind his victims' hands and feet if he could, and he often used their shoestrings. He would literally get their shoes off, pull the string out, and use it.
It was a great sense of relief that we finally found her. We finally knew what happened and gave us more evidence to use against McDuff if and when we could catch him.
At this point, you have the detailed statement of Hank Worley, you have the body of Melissa Northrop, you have her car, and you have Kenneth McDuff's car. And they know that both victims had been tied up with shoelaces, but you're still missing two big pieces. You're missing the body of Colleen Reed, and you're missing Kenneth McDuff.
I mean, the truth is we didn't have a clue where he was. And the Marshal Service had a notion to put it on national television.
I contacted America's Most Wanted.
The families of those murder victims pray for the capture of McDuff. Tonight, your call could end the manhunt.
America's Most Wanted aired that Friday. We got a call Monday from Kansas City police that they think McDuff may be in that area.
The Kansas City Police Department had gotten information from a viewer that had watched America's Most Wanted show. Hey, this is the guy that's wanted out of Texas for these killings.
A witness who called, he said he thought he was working with McDuff in Kansas City.
McDuff had gotten arrested up there on a prostitution sting, but they didn't take him into custody. They just wrote him a bench ticket and put his thumbprint on the ticket. I had the prints from the prison, and we compared them, and it was obvious that it was him.
We couldn't believe it. After all this manhunt, finally going to get this low-down scum off the street.
The Kansas City police find out that he was working on a garbage truck. So they set up a sting operation involving a checkpoint and stopped the truck under the pretense that they were doing a safety inspection on the vehicle. And that's when they identified and arrested him.
McDuff denied everything and then finally said, I want to talk to an attorney.
After he was caught, the federal judge ordered him removed to Waco, Texas, and the U.S. Marshals provided their fastest jet. So McDuff was handcuffed and he was placed in the jet opposite from me and a couple seats back. I think about being on the airplane with that guy. You know, he probably should have been duct taped to the seat.
We got back to the airport here in Waco. put him in a sheriff's unit, and we bust every red light coming through town. We get to the federal courthouse, and this big crowd of family and loved ones of people that had been his victims.
The word had gotten out. There was a groundswell of outrage.
By this time, everybody in Texas knew what a monster this guy was.
And they're screaming and cursing him. They're good people that have lost loved ones. And here we are having to protect this serial killer.
After finding Melissa Northrup's body and then arresting Kenneth McDuff, he is charged with the capital murder of Colleen Reed and the capital murder of Melissa Northrup. But Colleen Reed's body still has not been found, and Kenneth McDuff is not talking. Prosecuting a murder without a body is difficult because you have to prove that they're dead, and you like to be able to prove the cause of death too, and you can't do that when you don't have a body. For all those reasons, the state decided to move forward with the prosecution of Melissa Northrup's case first.
No comment.
McDuff had escaped the death penalty before because the Supreme Court threw it out. By this time, Texas had reinstated the death penalty. We felt that we needed to get him the death penalty so that he could never commit any more crimes like this. It was going to be difficult. It was not a slam dunk. We didn't have anybody that was an actual eyewitness to the murder of Melissa Northrop.
The prosecution case was the definition of circumstantial. I mean, they had to take a bunch of unrelated facts and put them all together, and there just really wasn't, in our mind, any conclusive evidence that he committed the murder. I think they were relying more on his past and his history than facts. To say it was a high-profile case is probably an understatement.
Name of the charges against you?
There was so much publicity that I don't think you would ever found 12 people who could have impartially judged it.
So the judge decided it would be better to have a change of venue and decided to send the case to Houston.
Is there a place you think you would get a fair trial?
I'll have to think about that.
Do you think you're a monster?
No.
And Judge Bob Burdett was assigned to oversee the case. And I'm very familiar with how he controls his courtroom. He doesn't put up with any nonsense. You better make sure your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted if you're trying a case in front of him.
When you have a crime and you don't have any witnesses to prove that the person did the crime, the law allows the state to present other very similar offenses, extraneous offenses as they're called.
Typically, you don't try one murder by bringing in another murder, but when you're trying to establish that the same person committed the crime, sometimes it can be allowed in for limited purposes only. There was a hearing in this trial where Judge Bob Burdett had to rule on whether or not he was going to allow into evidence the extraneous other murder of Colleen Reed in the trial of Melissa Northrop.
It's only in pretty limited situations that they're allowed to go into facts of another case, and this was one of them. It was basically two murder cases wrapped up into one.
Hank Worley was the key to breaking the case.
Worley's testimony showed how McDuff had accomplished the murder of Colleen Reed and the similarities between her kidnapping and murder and the Northrop kidnapping and murder.
Our cross-examination of Worley was really focused on he was just as potentially liable and as guilty as McDuff and could be facing the same charge and the same punishment. So he had every reason in the world to paint things in a light that got him out of a jam. I didn't think Worley was even close to a credible witness.
I think the testimony was extremely unsettling to the jury.
Kenneth, do you plan on taking the stand?
Yes, I will take the stand.
Are you positive?
It was definitely against our advice to take the stand, but it was something that he wanted to do.
The case they have isn't strong. They fear they get an acquittal verdict on the case as it stands right now. Okay.
Why would Kenneth McDuff take the stand when he hasn't, at that point, talked to law enforcement about anything?
I think that McDuff thought that he could go sell a story to the jury and convince them that he was innocent.
During the trial of Melissa Northrup, Kenneth McDuff says he wants to take the witness stand. His lawyers advise him not to do that, of course, because if he testifies, then he is going to be cross-examined on anything the prosecutors want to ask him about. He does not take the advice of his lawyers, and he takes the witness stand. From the prosecutor's point of view, I'm sure they were very excited that Kenneth McDuff didn't listen to his lawyers.
McDuff testified that he was not in Waco when Melissa Northrup was killed. He said he decided to leave Waco behind, to try to shed his past and get a new life, and gave all these details of his journey. And I'm sure he thought with that long story that he had impressed the jury, but I didn't think he'd accomplish what he intended.
When Kenneth McDuff takes the witness stand, not only can the prosecutors cross-examine him about Melissa Northrup, the victim he's being tried for, they can ask him about Colleen Reed and other crimes that the jury would not have known about when they were just deliberating his guilt.
John Siegler did the cross-examination, and he, of course, questioned McDuff about the murder in 1966. The jury had not heard anything about that murder previously. And also our evidence about the murder of Colleen Reed, that was something that obviously was helpful to us.
The evidence shows that this defendant is every person's nightmare.
The jury was out about 3 hours.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Kenneth Allen McDuff, guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment.
Kenneth McDuff is found guilty of murdering Melissa Northrup, and he is sentenced to die by lethal injection.
The whole time the judge was talking, I was crying, and it was just really a load lifted.
Kenneth Allen McDuff is the only person that's been on death row twice in Texas.
Can you tell me how you're feeling?
That's right, I'm guilty.
Any thoughts on what's next?
I guess I'm going to die, apparently. We all do, you know.
Will today's decision bring your family closure?
There's never be a closure. To me, my daughter's not resting in peace until this man is dead. So I don't want him to be able to do this ever again.
1 year later, and the case against McDuff for the murder of Colleen Reed was tried without a body.
The jury found him guilty and then also assessed a death penalty.
It's a relief, yeah. She died a horrible death, but she lived a good life.
It was like another nail in the coffin. He's not getting out of this one. You're going to pay now. And there's some pieces of me that I didn't know exist. The hate that I had for that guy and the things that I dreamed that I could do to that guy. It's just like, but God help me.
The last chapter will always be reserved for bringing Colleen home. So guys.
Kenneth McDuff is finally convicted for the capital murder of Colleen Reed and the capital murder of Melissa Northrup. But people still had a lot of questions. Where's Colleen Reed's body? Has he killed anybody else, anywhere else in the country? And how in the world did he get released from prison in the first place?
After he had been found guilty of capital murder of Melissa Northrup and Colleen Reed, I started investigating the parole board. The state was under pressure for prison crowding by a federal judge. So in 1989, the parole board are told, start releasing 150 inmates a day, 7 days a week. It started off with your hot check rioters and property crimes, but before long, they were at the bottom of the barrel. James Granberry, as parole board chairman, was finding inmates' families who had money.
The investigation revealed that he would actually shake them down. They love their kids. They don't want them in prison, and they'll do anything to get them out.
Kenneth McDuff walked out of a maximum security prison on parole under a cloud of corruption that no one realized at the time.
There was no way to know how many violent criminals got out this way. I was appalled.
Texas is supposed to be this tough place with all these death penalties. Well, heck, they were letting everybody out. It was a travesty, and it was an embarrassment, and it was wrong, and people were dying in the streets because of it.
You sure don't think that a serial killer is going to be one of the ones that slips through the cracks. But that's what happened. And look what happened in the free world, where he got to continue to prey on women, and he killed 2 more people. And that's all the fault of the system.
With McDuff, the justice system did its work. They put him back on death row. But to close those cases for the families, recovering the victims is the priority. So as he was getting close to the execution set date, I started going down to death row. I would spend 4 or 5 hours with him, talking to him. The most chilling thing that he said to me was about Colleen Reed. He said, I took her out of the vehicle and she got away from me and she ran and fell down. He said, if she had just gotten up and ran away, I could have never caught her. But she didn't. She just laid there and cried. I mean, you talk about the hair standing up on the back of your neck.
I needed to know where Colleen Reed was. And I needed him to tell me the truth, but he had no motivation to do so. And we had good information that he was going to be executed in just 2 or 3 weeks. Time was running out.
7 years after Colleen Reed goes missing, they still can't find her body. Her family is in pain, and Kenneth McDuff is sitting on death row not saying a word. A few weeks before his execution date, a window of opportunity cracks open.
McDuff comes in and he's complaining about a toothache. I say to him, look, you're a man of your word. I'm a man of my word. Here's what's going to happen. The dentist will be here tomorrow. I'll put you first on that list. You'll be going in, getting that tooth fixed. And once you get that tooth fixed, you come in and you sit in that chair and you give us what we need. And that's what he did. He drew out the map for Colleen's location, where he buried her.
This is where McDuff brought Colleen Reed after he tortured her and beat her to death. It brings back so many bad memories and feelings. Just knowing what happened to Colleen. Went right out there about where that third tree is. Had a tractor with a blade, and we had a bulldozer with a blade. Still couldn't find her.
When the blade went by the bulldozer and scraped, I saw something, and I moved away some dirt, and there was Colleen's skull.
We found her. Representatives of the medical examiner's office put her in the back seat of their car and took her back to Austin. They weren't going to put her in a trunk. You know, she was going to ride with them in the car.
We had information that thankfully led us to some remains a while ago. They would be the remains of Colleen. What we heard was done to her was etched in our minds, and I cannot, you just don't understand that. We've done this for years. We don't understand how one human being could do that to another human being.
This case, McDuff, coupled with the corruption side of it, changed the way the criminal justice system operated in Texas. It was a huge scandal.
It led to the largest expenditure of taxpayer money for prison construction in history.
There was the first overhaul of the criminal justice code in
over a quarter of a century.
Now we have what's called a series of the McDuff laws. He became the poster boy for change in the criminal justice system.
McDuff was executed tonight by the state of Texas. He was pronounced dead at 6:26.
I know that I never have to walk into another courtroom and look at him again. This part is over.
Colleen's memory has lived on. There are people that still love her and miss her. There's an endowment at LSU, her school, Colleen Reed Opportunity Fund, and so her name will be carried on with that scholarship. So
it's nice for us to say that ultimately they got justice. You know what? If I was Colleen Reed or Melissa Northrup's family, I would tell you I don't want to hear any talk about justice because all I feel is pain. Because a monster like Kenneth McDuff roamed the streets of Texas. And a lot of that roaming happened because the system failed Colleen and Melissa, and it failed all of us. And that is a horrible tragedy that should never have happened.